Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Trash Talk. This is a show where I talk trash with a very special guest. Who am I? I'm your host, DJ Woldridge, and with me this time, introduce yourself. Tell the kids at home who you are.
Hey, I'm a filmmaker and comedian. I mainly am podcasting right now, which is, I guess salient to the topic that we're talking about today. My name is Abe Epperson. That'll do for now.
And you may know Abe from Cracked or Small Beans. Those are the two main that I know, and plenty of other places. We're going to get into it.
Those are my old haunts for sure.
So, as I said at the top, this is the show where I get to talk about whatever I like to talk about. If you are familiar with my podcast network, Only Stupid Answers, typically those conversations tend to veer towards, superhero stuff, blockbuster movies, stuff like that. But I have other interests, and this is tangentially related. We are talking about movies, and Abe, why am I talking about movies? Let's rewind a little bit. And can you tell the kids at home a little bit about your career trajectory, how you got where you are?
Yeah, sure. Picture 2007, I'd say.
It's a simpler time.
2 years after the iPhone, the internet was full of like innocuous memes and Facebook walls, and like YouTube was like, I think, picked up in like 2006 or something like that. And at the time, like my main collaborative partner, Michael Swaim, who you may recognize, who's been on this podcast, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I wrote for like an Onion-esque newspaper satire publication, I should call it, at UCSD. That's where we both met. And I immediately recognized he was like a comic genius. And I, at the time, was in the visual arts field, so we made some sketches that I filmed. In fact, we made like 30 in 1 year and a half under the name Those Aren't Muskets. And then Crack noticed us, and then we were contractors for a few years, and then full-time. During that time, I also went to USC grad school for film. In 2010, we filmed a feature film called Kill Me Now, which is a horror comedy starring Michael Swaim and others. You'll recognize a bunch of sketch comedians because we grew up through sketch.
Yeah.
And then I spent like 7 years creating hundreds of shorts. And then once Crack disbanded in 2019, 18, a bunch of comedians and voices joined the Small Beans podcast network. And we've basically been doing that for 7 years. Also, we're trying to make another feature. I don't know what else. I recently helped out as an assistant coach on a YMCA baseball team.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, I'll put in some assistant coaching questions in there. We'll slip them in there just to keep everything all evened out.
That's nice.
That's so wild because that's back at a time where that could happen, where you're just out there doing your thing, and people noticed what you were doing. Like, hey, do you want to come get paid for that?
Right.
That doesn't exist anymore. that doesn't happen.
No, it's not really sketch comedy. I mean, there's TikTok. There are sketch comedians. They exist. It's just there was a sketch boom around 2010, I want to say.
Well, and there's also a boom of I won't say the internet's new. It wasn't new, but this idea of YouTube is growing and stuff like that.
Right.
Because my people prior to this would be most familiar. I worked with SourceFed for a long time. I started as an editor and did some on-camera stuff for them. And it was a similar thing about Google just dumping money into, it was Philip DeFranco. He had his thing that was doing really well. So Google just gave him a bunch of money and that spread off and stuff. And then it's still a little unclear to me now, having lived through that, several channels go defunct, from SourceFed to Defy to Collider, several places I worked go the way of the dodo. I haven't, at the time I would have told you, I would have said like, yeah, because it's not all the overhead and stuff. Like, you guys want to run like old TV studios. That's not how YouTube works. That's not what it is. But part of me is also like, I think it's more that just, it's not, these big companies just sucking the value out of them and leaving the husk at the side of the road.
It really is the way in which you run the business. Because I'll ask you this question. If the overhead was murderous of the film industry, why would films still exist? It's that tech companies came in and said, we're going to run this like a tech company, like a .com, which is great for that. But it's also kind of terrible for studio how the studio model works.
Yeah.
There's similarities, but there's huge differences in terms of how things are greenlit, what they go for. Whereas, the .com model is more of like just put out content
Yeah.
constantly. It
Well,
doesn't matter.
The good news is that everything is run like a tech company now. No notes, everything's going great. Actually, this is very pertinent to what we're going to be talking about today, because we're going to be talking about the current state of movies.
Yeah.
One last thing before we get into that. That was a perfect transition, but I'm not ready for it yet, because I do want to ask you if there's anything you're watching or reading or video games you're playing, anything that you're into that you would like to share.
I saw this question when you emailed me, and I thought about it long and hard. Is it okay if I brought two?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try to be.
You're the guest. You're in that. You're
I can do
our
what I
guest. You
want.
can do what you want. Put your feet up.
So nice, DJ.
Yeah.
The first one, I keep screaming on the rooftops. I don't know why my friends won't watch this, but have you ever seen Taskmaster, the
No.
British one?
No.
Greg Davies and Alex Horn. It's hilarious. It's so much fun. It's a game panel show with like 5 comedians each season, and they attempt random tasks like they filmed previously, them doing tasks set up by these two guys, Greg Davies, who basically acts like a king.
Yeah.
Like, you must please me, I give you points for who wins. And then
Yeah.
Alex Horn, who's the kind of like assistant director of the thing and the show creator, who acts as a little Davies like fuckboy assistant.
Yeah.
And they accumulate points. Points don't matter, by the way. And it's just a reality show where mostly people are solo trying to figure out how to paint a portrait of yourself with sausages, or fill a water jug from a distance or something like that. And it's just fascinating to see how these television personalities' brains work. It's literally the only reality television I can stomach, personally. And I would say that if this does interest you, check out like season 7, which has James Acaster, who's hilarious. And the new season, the reason I'm chirping about it now, is Jason Mantzoukas from America is in it.
Yeah.
And he's just absolutely killing it right now.
I bet he's
like
great.
A rude, stereotypical American amongst all these British people. So I would say go check that out if that's your speed.
Yeah.
The other one is that I would say there is a Korean. I'm not a huge anime guy.
Yeah.
But like I have a show about Cowboy Bebop.
I was gonna say, I was like, wait a second. Yeah.
But I'm not like huge. Like I didn't like grow up with it. Like Cowboy Bebop was like the only anime I'd watched well into my 20s.
Yeah.
But I caught this recent one called Solo Leveling. And it might be the best animation that we've ever gotten in a TV show, period. It's not like Akira or like Satoshi Kon stuff, which is almost untouchable, or even Miyazaki stuff. But, it fucking rules. And the idea behind it is people in this world can't level up, and hunters are kind of set in their reality of how they're born, and their job is to go defeat monsters. And our protagonist starts off as useless, but then he is the only one who's the ability to level up, so he becomes OP kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he kind of he begins to loathe his power, kind of like a Dr. Manhattan situation. So I thought that one took me by surprise, because I like came out of nowhere for me, at least.
So for anybody that wants to watch Taskmaster, where would they find that?
Taskmaster, you can watch the whole thing on YouTube.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then for Solo Leveling,
I believe it's just Crunchyroll.
Crunchyroll.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'm similar to you in that I do not consider myself a big anime guy. Cowboy Bebop, obviously, and you just met Satoshi Kon, Akira. You know what I mean? The highlights, right? Yeah. Studio Ghibli. But it's like, we did a show. My former co-host and I, we did a show where we went through like My Hero Academia. It's like, I'll keep watching this. This is perfectly
pleasant.
accessible.
Yeah.
I can totally do this. Yeah. Some of them are like, this is not, I can't. But I
don't. Yeah.
The one thing I give anime, I just had my previous guest, Johnny. We were talking about adult animation. The one thing that I wish more Western animation would pull from that anime does is like anime can be anything. It's like, here's a girls' tennis school. Why not? Okay. Do whatever. Who cares? It doesn't.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I love, as an enjoyer of films and culture, as you are. like that's outside of our box a little bit.
Hmm.
We're Western babies.
Yep.
And so to see what the Eastern babies are up to, it's kind of fascinating once in a while. There's whole genres that I'm like, this exists? Like,
Yeah.
what the hell is an isekai?
Yeah,
You
well,
know?
it's a good pool for innovation because I think something that we're going to talk about a little bit is I'm a little bit concerned about Western media's seeming inability to innovate.
Yeah.
And I do think there is merit in, and I always put the caveat, we just said I'm not an anime guy, so I'm sure there's like anime fans out there that be like, actually, this is a problem in anime. It's like, I'm sure it is. I don't know. But from an outsider's perspective, it's like, hey, here's a show with a guy with a chainsaw for a head. I'm like, yeah, why aren't we doing stuff like this? Like,
Why isn't this, like replace Ozark with chainsaws, please?
yeah,
Somebody,
just
do
pull,
something.
look at what other people, what other cultures are doing, and see what you can. It's one of the things. I'm a big Superman fan. I'm excited for, cautiously optimistic for the new Superman movie. Been burned multiple times, but I'm cautiously optimistic. But I really liked the new My Adventures with Superman show because they're like, what if Superman, but what if like anime, like just do it like an anime, like a
Yeah,
magical girl type thing. It's like, yeah, why not? Yeah,
fuck it, great.
yeah.
Yeah,
I haven't seen that. Do that.
haven't seen it, done it, do
Yeah.
it. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that there is a feeling of experimentation on that side of the planet that isn't necessarily happening right now.
Yeah.
And they're suffering because of it. We're going to talk about the main thing that really governs everything in life, which is money. Um, Making that a reason for it. Like we were talking about overhead before. There's a
Yeah.
reason why these animes come out with one season and then that's it, because they're
Yeah.
there to market like the merchandise and the light novels,
Yeah.
the manga and stuff like that. So it,
Yeah.
it governs everything, and it makes it so that those things can't thrive because
Yeah.
we're in that ecosystem. But at the same time, at least it's an ecosystem that is trying stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas I think for the most part, we have very little of that right now. Even though there's a lot of creativity happening in TV and film, there's a fear, I think, overall in the industry about taking risks like that.
100%, 100%. And I think it's important. You just kind of touched on something. I think it's important to mention up top. Like you just said, it's not that there's not innovation going on in the industry. It's not that there aren't exciting things happening. It's just the overall health or ecosystem. That's the way to phrase it. The overall ecosystem does not appear to be healthy. And we might speculate a little bit about why that is here, but I think we're already kind of diving into one of the first questions I wanted to kick off with, which is, how do you feel about the current? We're going to focus on, you and I both watch TV, it sounds like, but we're going to be focusing on movies in particular. How are you currently feeling as a movie guy? How are you feeling about the way movies are right now, the state of film right now?
I think TV took a lot of money, and maybe rightfully so, for the last 20 years. And there's so many conversations that we can talk about. We can talk about the low budgets, mid budgets, higher budgets, mega blockbuster budgets, and how this
Yeah.
kind of genetic makeup of movies like drastically changed in the last 20 years, more so than the 50 years before it. Like the pivot to streaming has been more disruptive than like the FinCEN legislation of the 80s, where cable became existent.
Yeah.
And or we can even talk about how the messages or propaganda that movies typically, because I'm a firm believer that all art is inherently kind of propaganda, and not in a derogatory way. It means it has a point. It's trying to make an argument thematically, and that conversation has totally changed in the last 20 years, and that's always changing, but like the last 20 years have been crazy. The nuance of characters that have appeared for the last decade, we can talk about that. But my widest interpretation would be basically this: that the more massive fandoms via intellectual property soaked up the attention of the studios to the extent that the massive successes of those properties in the 2000s and the 2010s transformed the entire industry model into a high risk, high gain mentality, which then attracted rich tech founders who specialized in media. At the same time, they were booming, and that's where the money went. So this created a kind of disparity that essentially shunted a generation of mid to low budget films. And I think that that's the ecosystem that we're describing in film right now is exactly because of that major tenet. And there are suggestions that kind of align with, because of that, all these other things happened, you know?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. This idea that like once a movie, and I don't know which one was the first one, was it The Dark Knight? I don't know. That made $1 billion. It was like, well, now all movies need to make. If we're not making a movie that's going to make $1 billion, what are we even doing? And it's like, well, you could still make money. I don't know.
But it's also globally, or like in terms of like, not to be American centric, but like just in terms of our economy, doesn't it make sense that it coincides with the concept of viral hits, you know, at the same time? It's the same mentality of you just got to get one bag and then you're set, buddy. You know, like, so it's the mentality comes not just from film. Like nothing changed in film to warrant this change. The kind of trend and mood of the entire society and how how profiteering exists, that changed the reality of many, many industries, obviously.
Our whole economic structure is run by degenerate gamblers.
I think it's related. The same reason that I think movies are quote unquote shitty right now, or whatever, however people want to phrase it. Even though I think there are bastions of hope for sure, because art is art, and that's the cool thing about art. It's tied directly to like in-shitification, you know, planned obsolescence, all this kind of tactics for trying to squeeze pennies from stones.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think there's also this, along with that, this idea of turning art into a franchise model. Not to, you know, obviously that is the phrase that is used, but I'm thinking, when I'm thinking, you know, McDonald's or whatever, like, so now we can turn Marvel into a money printing machine.
Or we can turn Lord of the Rings,
Harry Potter. What is the thing that I don't have to trust my creatives with, that I can just give them and say, here, do, and it'll be. This was my main thing when all the discussion around AI and like having AI make movies. It's like, well, of course Netflix would want something like this because they've already been trying to do it. Here's the Netflix formula. If you're making a Netflix movie, this needs to happen at this time, this needs to happen at this time, this needs to happen at this time. If you're making a Netflix show, each episode needs to end, you know what I mean? They're trying to make it into a formula, and that's, sometimes it'll work fine. Some things will work really well in that formula. But it will homogenize things to a point that it's hard to get excited the way, you know, you could have back in the day with something, because you're discovering something. You don't really have that feeling anymore.
I have this low-key theory that I've been developing over the years, and I read some articles. I believe there's a New Yorker article about this a decade ago or something like that, just about Game of Thrones ruined everything. It's just the concept of those years and the kind of like, did you notice that when Game of Thrones came out, and I love Game of Thrones, you know, we can all, I don't really care to talk about the final seasons, but like, you know, fantastic work by craftspeople, like an absolute success, changed the game in terms of streaming. You know, like everyone was listening to what the next episode was, and that became the cultural moment, right? And so like we got all these companies, even like journalism, you know, was changed. Everyone had to have a react show, you know, like everyone had, like every rag had it. It was crazy.
Hey, we had our reaction shows early ages of my podcast. We had the Game of Thrones reaction shows.
What are we doing? What are we doing? But it was because the hits were there. Everyone wanted to talk about and listen to Game of Thrones content. And that mentality of catching like everything was good during that, and then it went away, and it was like, what else? What do we talk about now? You know, like,
Yeah,
do we
well,
go
it's
back to
interesting.
Batman? That feels wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because I hadn't thought about Game of Thrones doing for the prestige streaming era what stuff like Marvel and Harry Potter did for movies. In that, I'm watching this show on Paramount. It's called Mobland. It stars Tom Hardy and Pierce Brosnan and like Patty Considine, every like great British actor. And it's basically like Tom Hardy went to I don't know the showrunner's name off the top of my head, but he was like, "Hey, I want my own Peaky Blinders or I want my own Sopranos," right?
Right.
And the first few episodes, one, you can already feel the Game of Thronesification of it in that. What is Tom Hardy doing in this show, man? Like he's like, you don't need this show. Like Pierce Brosnan, what are you doing on this TV show? Like you're great, but like you don't need this. And then and I really liked it. The first few episodes are really kind of tense and grounded, and they're trying to. It's a kind of like typical crime show. You know, this guy's dealing with his family stuff, whatever. And then through 3 episodes before the end, he's having huge shootouts with like with the Moroccan mob and stuff like that, and like characters are dying left and right. I'm like, this isn't what this show is. What's happened? And I was like, wait, because it's Game of Thrones. They want those moments.
Everything
that people tweet their ex or whatever we're calling it now. That's exactly what they're trying to do.
Yeah, they're trying to make everything that kind of engagement because then everybody's happy. Then Nielsen ratings are high. All Facebook is, kicking ass because everyone's talking about it, on that platform. And it just becomes a kind of like, high tide raises all ships kind of concept.
If it works,
so they're chasing it. They're chasing it forever. And we're never, it seems, on the horizon, we're not going back because, people hate ads. And people do not want to go to theaters if they have a home movie option. Like there's just so many. That's why I think TV is winning right now.
Yeah,
and
I get it too. Especially since I like I like the theatrical experience. I'm fortunate that a lot of the movies I go to are press screenings or screenings with other professionals, so they're usually pretty chill. But I will every time I have to go to like a general audience screening. COVID broke everybody's brains. Nobody knows how to behave in public anymore. Like people are on their phone, like having full volume conversations in the middle of movies and stuff like that. So it's like, I guess I get it. I get it.
I have experienced a little of that.
It depends on where you go when you go. That sort of thing.
But I am sure some places are much worse than where I go.
I know my experience at the Alamo was always great. Alamo Draft House, one of my favorite theaters. This does connect to a question we got from the Discord. Stacey Guetta, will we ever get to a time again where IP doesn't rule the box office?
Yes, of course. I believe, just because I think all art, and even the commoditization of it, is transformative by the culture that it's in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So. Like, I don't know. What's like when we talk about the theater experience, what is shown on these walls? I think we're clearly converting to like amusement parks, right? As Scorsese said. And I think it's fine to pivot to these new experiences in a theater. We're going to get things like augmented reality. We already have IMAX. We tried 3D. One of them's going to hit. And these are the ways to get people in a group experience, and the home experience has really been solved, at least for long form and like many hours attachments to media. So we solved that. And home movies viewing seems to be, for the time being, the dominant form of media. But I think we're going to get innovative stuff coming from theaters in particular, for sure, because they're rewriting themselves right now. Like the blockbuster, Marvel's over, so to speak. I mean, those will always exist. Branded iconography will always be the kind of blockbusters, I think, now. But when it comes down to it, people want what they want, and even Disney, who's like a typically conservative company, they're like, we're woke now, or like whatever, as long as it makes money, we're doing that. So to say that something that is IP dominant and that will be the only kind of wind in the sails of these media conglomerates. I think they're definitely never going to not exist. It's always going to exist from here on in. I think that, you know, box has been opened.
Yeah.
But I do believe that people will get tired of some IPs. It's
Yeah.
just going to become more niche, like the internet did, like TV did, like movies have been doing for 100 years.
Yeah.
It'll become more niche. There'll be more genres, and some of those genres will have insane success. And it'll be like, why did that work?
Yep.
And then everyone's going to try to recreate that. And it's not going to even be branded iconography. It's just going to be some random new thing.
That's why we have Die Hard is like a standard template for like a movie idea from late 80s through the 90s.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're talking. That's why I'm like a structuralist. Like me
Yeah.
and Swaim, like when we first like started talking about this kind of stuff, we were both like enamored with the structure of things because the structure reflects what the thing is trying to accomplish, right? What's the most efficient rendition of that? Well, this is this is how you accomplish that. We're in a pretty shitty situation right now where we have things like Minecraft or, Borderlands, where they're just like paint by numbers,
Yeah.
put it into an AI, spit it back out, it seems.
Yeah.
Because they're so definitive. They have defined our kind of cultural osmosis for generations. The concept of boy meets girl or boy shoots plane, something like that. Like there's just like 18 models of the basic story. We never get tired of.
We just don't get boy shoots plane movies anymore.
We need more boy shoots plane.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
More chainsaw faces.
Yeah. So you kind of walked me towards you said one of your pet theories. I want to say one of my pet theories, and I got pushed back on this on one of my shows. And it really forced me to think about like what I mean when I'm talking about it. We were talking about Deadpool and Wolverine.
Nah, screw him, man.
And I just said offhand, I was like, hey, I don't see Deadpool and Wolverine as a movie. And people were like, well, you're trying to say it's a bad movie. No. I'm saying that for me, like for what I would think of what a movie is, if you're talking about a movie as something that is trying to create emotions or give you thrills or any of those things that we traditionally mean when we mean a movie. And you mentioned Scorsese and people were like, well, so you mean difference between movie and film? I'm like, no. I don't mean that. I kind of mean I think Deadpool and Wolverine is just a series of, hey, here's this reference. Hey, here's this reference. Hey, here's this reference. And to me, that's not a movie. And to me, that's not, like you were saying, not putting a value judgment on any of that stuff. That's not me saying it's bad because of that. I'm thinking it is actually really what it is attempting to do. It's doing quite well. It made $1 billion. It's just, to me, that's not traditionally what I think of as a movie. And I think other projects fall in a similar category. I think the new Super Mario Brothers movie is an example. Looking at the discourse around the Minecraft movie, which I have not seen, it sounds like that's similar. Well, it's like, hey, because if you think about Deadpool and Wolverine, you could make the argument like, well, it's a comedy, so it's a vehicle for jokes. It's like, even the jokes are just references. It's like, hey, remember Chris Evans was Human Torch. Remember that? It's like, well, that's not a joke. That's just a reference.
It's member berries for sure.
And so for me, that would fall into similar, what I would describe as content, like what we're talking about. This is something. It's kind of the fictionalized form of like a new Rockstars video, which is great. I work with those guys, and I think if I try to define Deadpool and Wolverine as a movie, I don't think it's doing a good job at being a movie. But if I think about it in the terms of it's not trying to be what would traditionally be considered a movie, and for people that were pushing back, I get it. It's 2 hours. It's in theaters. On the basic terms, it's a movie. I understand. But
in the atomic writing. The scene by scene, you're not. Yeah,
I think it's trying to do something different. And
I watched that and I laughed.
Yeah.
And I also had that thought, and then I thought about The Simpsons, and then so I'd ask to you, not that you. I'm not even trying to defeat your opinion.
No, that's fine.
All honesty, I agree with it, but just the nuance of it is The Simpsons doing what TV shows should be doing, because
Well, I
that's a
think
series of references. I would
you're
posit
right.
that it's only that it's good. It's good at doing that, so
Well,
it gets
maybe
a
that.
pass.
To be fair, I didn't grow up on. I grew up in a pretty conservative household, and The
Yeah.
Simpsons was not allowed in my household.
Dude, I
So
think we talked about this.
yeah,
You and I had the same thing.
yeah,
I binge watched The Simpsons in college
yeah.
because
So
my
I,
mom was like, "You can't. Bart is too much of a rude boy."
he's a rude boy. You can't watch him. But I would also argue, and this might be true of later seasons, if Simpsons is basically comprised of references to itself. It's like, hey, if you remember in season 5, episode 6, that this is well, then is it really a show, or is it just like a Wikipedia article that's been animated? You know what I mean?
Kind
Like,
of. I mean, that's what references are, right? Like when Simpsons does a thing where it's like,
Yeah.
these 8-year-olds are gonna love this Orson Welles reference.
yeah,
Like,
but it's an Orson Welles reference. It's not, as opposed to, I would say, Deadpool and Wolverine, where it's like, hey, remember when Channing Tatum was cast
the
as Gambit,
quality of
and
the
now he's
reference.
yeah, you know what? Maybe it is. Maybe it's because I just think. I don't necessarily think, I don't like Deadpool and Wolverine's my least favorite of the Deadpool movies, which are a series of movies I don't particularly like. But I don't. It feels wrong to me to say like Deadpool and Wolverine's bad. Again, like it's doing a good job at what it's trying to do. I
Right.
just don't particularly care for what it's trying to do. And it was the same thing
Yes.
with this new Super Mario Brothers movie.
New Super Mario's Minecraft.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, remember Mario Kart? And it's like, yeah, that's not, that doesn't mean anything to this. Like, that's not, you're not being a movie. You're just like, it's a clip show for the games that I like. Here's $1 billion. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? But I guess what I want to get to is this question of, do you see that kind of what we're talking about? Do you see this as kind of a permutation
I think it's a
of
permutation.
movies?
Yeah.
And is it, we just said
gonna
we're not
exist
putting
for a
value
while.
judgment. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing this is happening? Do we have feelings about that this is a thing?
I try to be agnostic as possible in
Yeah.
a lot of stuff because I feel like I will very quickly, if I were to be set, and I think this is true about all of us. Yes, you indeed, listener.
Yeah.
Like we do this thing where if we had everything the way exactly we wanted it, it would be terrible.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
you as an individual,
Yep.
because you have tastes,
Yeah.
and that's excellent. We all have tastes. We all want to watch Taskmaster or some shit, right?
Mhm.
You can't be, you're not a plurality, so
Yeah.
that you are immediately thrown out of the discourse as, like a person who should be able to determine exactly what the programming is. And so in that regard, I do think that we are I will become old man yelling at cloud very quickly.
Yeah.
And so I try to be agnostic because I'm not the only demographic, right?
Yeah.
I do think that with Minecraft, they're doing cheap shots. Chicken Jockey.
Yeah.
I truly believe Chicken Jockey was the out of the brain of a genius marketer. I do not think it got organically got formed as a meme.
Yeah.
I just don't believe it.
Yeah.
Because it's just too there. It's just too perfect.
Yeah.
And for people who don't quite know what Chicken Jockey is, if in the Minecraft movie, if you know nothing about Minecraft, there's this one moment where all these teens threw, all the popcorn and yelled Chicken Jockey. It's the basics of a meme, right? It's just
Yeah.
mimetic in its essence. And I think that these movies, this trend that you're kind of pointing out, like, is the future going to just be this? Well, no, as per our kind of previous conversation. But also, like, this is going to be a fixture. This is going to be a figment of, how movies are done. It goes back to the amusement park thing. They're trying everything they can right now, the studios, to repeat engagement. And so we're going to have a tier of this movie that is like this. It will become a genre, a film. Everything just becomes more niche, just because the world is not that complex. There's just a lot of it.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
it comes down to it, if it makes money, if there's enough nerds out there who like talking about Dungeons and Dragons, guess what? That gets a fucking movie.
Yeah.
And that's perfect. That's how it should be, in my opinion. It's just that now movies, all of the things that we in particular look for in content, have gone to the internet, gone to TV, gone to these other locations.
Yeah.
They still exist. But I do want to address that something I think we've been alluding to this whole time, because I've been talking a lot about like the wider kind of considerations of what's going to do well, what's not going to do well, right? But you're absolutely right that there is a narrative story effect to all the things that are happening. You know, it's the Quibi of it all, one could say. These particular films that we've been mentioning are unified in their lack of interest in like a cohesive beat structure, right? These things seem to happen because they need to happen, not because someone did something that moves a narrative forward or anything like that. Like we basically lost the therefore, right? And that fucks your structure, because now your structure can be anything. It can be and then. Because the new metric, I think, for a lot of these, for this Minecraft movie, for like we're just trying to get mass appeal, 4-quadrant success via engagement. Engagement is the new metric. It has supplanted intrigue and drama and conflict and these other very typical forms that we use to get people to put their ass in seats, right? And I think you've mentioned that's kind of become at the time, in the moment, cultural moment in 2025, become the good dominant trend of like this quotationalism. This exists and it's popular, so let's reference it. And I think that's we talked about the Simpsons, like how we're Simpsons babies, and that's kind of what we want, and that isn't bad. It's just how artists propagate. But now it has this nihilistic feeling, or this sarcastic feeling, where it's like no one wants to be this. We're all laughing at the fact that it's crazy. We're in a Minecraft movie, guys. You know, it's like every moment seems to be peppered with that, which I do think is bad for our health a little bit, because it means that if everything is disposable theater, what happens when something isn't disposable? Do you not know how to like deal with it? You know, like, and I think that even in like the 90s, where kids were being raised by like Little Mermaid or whatever, those had toxic messages as well.
True.
But at the same time, they were trying to build you up. They weren't trying to say the world is on fire, because
they weren't so explicitly. They weren't so explicitly a commercial. You know what I mean? Like, hey, well, I mean, which is not. And again, you're right, because we run into this tricky territory. But I do think it's still worth having these conversations, even though they can be tricky. Because I grew up watching Simpsons wasn't okay, but Transformers, Ninja Turtles, those were those were literally toy commercials.
They were,
literally G.I. Joe, all of that, right? And so those are part of. But the trick is, and even though I have nostalgia for those brands, I still, as an adult, I could pan over, you'd see a shelf with some Transformers action figures, G.I. Joe, Snake Eyes, stuff like that. But I couldn't go back and rewatch those things, because they don't. There's nothing beyond that nostalgia, as opposed to you think about a movie like let's use an example that I think is at the fulcrum of kind of like the pop culture we're talking about. Something like Ghostbusters, right, which has the iconography and has whatever, but it also works as a comedy on its own terms. It does not expect you to be like, well, Ghostbusters, you know what I mean? Like, it's trying to win you over on its own terms, as opposed to like, well, you played the Mario games, so whatever. You know what I mean?
So, come on down to the slop house. Get you slop, you piggies.
And I would. There is the part of me. It's like, try harder, man. Do more. Try and tell an actual story with this stuff. Like, I'll go to bat. I know it's not a good movie, but you know what? The Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo, Mario Brothers movie. For one, as a little kid, I wasn't allowed to watch Blade Runner, but I could watch that. So that was my gateway drug to cyberpunk. You know what I mean? But it's one of those, like, they tried stuff, man. Most of it worked.
They tried stuff. It was mostly horrible,
but they were trying. They were out there. They were swinging the bat, man. We're going for it. And I don't know. I have an appreciation.
I mean, all that innovation moved to the web, man. Like, you look at how creative the web is, just in general.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that, like, how can movies compete with some of this stuff? Because it's a different thing, it's like a different format. But the hour and a half format, sit down, watch a story, unless phones have truly cooked our brain,
Yeah.
like we're always gonna want that. It's like it's perfect. It's TV as well, but TV has now become a long form thing.
Yeah.
TV was like 45 minutes,
Mhm,
24 minutes. TV no longer is 24 minutes, 48 minutes. It's now 8 weeks of your time. You know, like they're longer form.
If you're lucky, sometimes if the Netflix model is like 13 hours right now, you son of a bitch.
Yeah,
we expect you to sit down and watch it all right now.
And I go, yeah, I will.
Well, thank you. Give me more.
Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, I think that the hour and a half format, when we really talk about what is a movie,
Yeah.
well, it's a thing you sit down and watch for an hour and a half, usually to 3 hours.
Yeah.
That can be anything.
Yeah.
And I think that we've always recognized this. Studios have always recognized it, but they always use these kinds of albatross to like figure it out. Now it's going to be a little bit more piecemeal, I think, in terms of the only problem is that the economics have pushed out the mid to low budgets. So true experimentation, which often needs a small footprint because no one's going to gamble on that forever.
Yeah.
We're just taking fewer chances, right?
Yeah.
Ghostbusters 1 was the least the smallest budget of all the Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And that's true almost like across the board in terms of sequels and franchises.
Yeah.
Because the first one limited its risk, and that's usually what informs it, like why it's good.
Well,
You know,
we just
like-
mentioned Deadpool, and Deadpool was one of the few that was something approaching a mid-budget. You know what I mean? Like one of the few superhero punch 'em ups that we allowed to have like a mid-budget, and it made a lot of money. And so now, and of course, Deadpool 2 was twice the budget of Deadpool 1, and Deadpool and Wolverine was twice the budget of Deadpool 2.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's always how it works.
Yeah, and so, but I think the mid-budget thing is probably near and dear to your and my's heart for people that have been trying to get into the film industry.
Oh, for
because
sure.
that's our pathway, and it doesn't exist anymore. They got rid of it.
And festivals are a mess right now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like
Well-
so you almost have to break through. Like, what's your other platforms? You
Yeah,
know? I
but-
guess YouTube. You know,
Well,
like
you talk
what are we
about
doing here?
YouTube and TikTok being a platform of innovation. One of the issues there is that, and this gets into the economics of it too. That's also a platform where they don't directly pay us. You know, whatever this video, when it goes up on
Right.
YouTube, whatever this video makes, I'm going to be getting pennies off the dollar of whatever YouTube makes off of it.
Right.
And I don't get no benefits, no whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I'm basically, it's a content platform. It's like a Netflix or whatever, that they don't have to pay any of their really, they don't have to pay any of their creators. They just get TikTok especially, we're just dumping content for free on their platform for them.
Yeah. It's actually really funny you mentioned that. And I actually mentioned it earlier at the top of this podcast. FinCEN legislation. So you know what that is? That happened in the 80s. That created things, like created cable networks and like Bravo and TNT and stuff like that. All those channels only exist because a centralized government made federal legislation that said that the big guys, can only have X number of affiliates in a given town.
Yeah.
So all other airwaves have to be given to the next bidder. You can't buy them all out. You can't Starbuck the shit out of television.
Yeah.
And they made that legislation. We need that legislation now for the web. We need it. Because otherwise, you're just going to get AT&T or fucking Verizon or whoever owns the ISPs dictating content. Because they own it all. Because that already happened. We already kind of have this oligarchical kind of hierarchy here.
Yeah.
So we need that legislation. And then you'll start to see things like the mid-tier exist again. If we don't do it, it's going to go the same way every other capitalistic story goes over enough time.
Yeah.
Monopolization and dominance over any kind of checks and balances.
Yeah.
For the sake of profit, which is fine. That is I actually am fine with capitalism up to a point. Like it is an effective way to develop and prosper. it also has at the end of the legs and throughout
Yeah.
some crazy amount of abuse and trauma for its citizenry.
Yeah.
And that's the matter. That's how it works.
Yeah.
That's why it's a terrible system and a wonderful one at the same time. But here we are. I don't think that it's going to happen by its own rights. I don't think it's going to be something that like mid-tier movies, just one mid-tier movie becomes, like shows us all the light.
Yeah.
We've had those.
We had I just saw
Everything
Ballerina.
Everywhere All at Once. We've had those kinds
Everything
of
Ever All at Once. We just mentioned Deadpool, the first John Wick, which then went on to be a franchise.
Right.
The examples
doesn't
exist.
Change the game. That franchise just becomes bigger and
Yeah.
becomes a part of the system
Yeah.
because there's money on the table. And I think that until we actually legislate it and
Yeah.
make it so that it's just not a possibility for these big guys to, push everyone out, it's not gonna happen.
We did an episode of this. I had Andrew Sage on to talk about anarchism, and I gotta say, with everything going on, he made some good points.
Absolutely.
But to your point, I think whatever system, I think one of the main lessons I truly believe is whatever system you're doing, it needs to be right. You need to stay on top of it. I think all of us want to be like, cool, this is the way things are governed, and now that's somebody else's problem. It's like, no, you always need to babysit it.
No. Do you know Thomas Jefferson thought that we should rewrite the Constitution of the United States every 19 years?
That's not a bad idea. Did you know a lot of the founding fathers thought we shouldn't have a standing army? And maybe there was some merit in that as well. Maybe it was, but anyway, this isn't a political show. Everything's political now. Everything's political now. I don't want it. It's the way it is.
When these systems negotiate for us our lives, we have to talk about them because they affect every industry, and this is just one of them. This happens to be a luxury trade, which traditionally have been like economy proof. Like luxury trades often will just persist through wartime, and it's fine, because people need to get out and away from it all. Movies, that aspect of society, movies, that's never going away.
Yeah, I agree, and I think you are right in that there will always be opportunities for storytellers to kind of break through through the noise, through the system. And I think what I feel like we're arguing is that it'd be good if that was a little easier to do, though. If there weren't so many barricades for those storytellers to like really tell honest, stories that connect with people.
I got folks. I got a brother who's like, hey, you want to break through? Like Tangerine was just shot in an iPhone. And it's just like, yeah,
man.
Yeah, sure, man.
Yeah.
I'll get right on that and shoot that. But it's also like they're not wrong.
Yeah.
But it's just woefully like not seen. It's the forest and the trees.
Yeah. You probably got hit with this one as well. Primer was made for $5,000. $5,000.
He didn't even know how to use the camera. Yeah, that's why it looks like shit. Primer looks like shit. Doesn't mean it's not a good movie. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's fun to watch, Yeah, but make it and then go, yeah, you did it. You shot it on an iPhone. It's great and it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Now go market it.
Because a couple things with those, Tangerine a little less true than Primer. Different ecosystem. You go back to Clerks. Totally different ecosystem. One. Two, how many people did that and it didn't become Clerks or Primer or Tangerine? You know what I mean? Like, also, Tangerine wasn't Sean Baker's first movie out of the gate. He'd already been working for a while. Same with... I'm thinking about the what was the movie the Safdies did before? Good Time, whatever. It wasn't their first outing. Anyway, we don't need to go down that rabbit trail. Let's go down this rabbit trail. Mike Joyce in the Discord. Will AI movies take over? This has no relation to our conversation about Minecraft or Mario Brothers. By the way.
It does. It does, absolutely.
It's not like those movies were written with AI,
it's not
probably.
Like those were written by, it's not like Borderlands wasn't pooped out.
Yeah.
No, okay. So AI is a tough one because that question is only, it doesn't like fall. It's a great question, but it knows the answer to itself, except for the definition of the phrase takeover. As I've been spouting time and time again, and totally can disagree with me, but I do think things are going to become niche. We're going to see an overwhelming amount of AI films. And guess what? There's going to be a day when we all have to reckon with the fact that one of them is going to be good.
One will break through. The one will break through.
There's going to be an AI film that fucking rips, and everyone's going to go like, yeah. It's going to be the Fury Road of AI.
Yeah.
And we're going to go, oh, fuck, we're done. And then it's not going to be able to be recreated for a decade.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And guess what that sounds like? Every other fucking art piece that's ever been tried to be made.
Yeah.
It is a tool. I agree that it is a destructive tool. I am not a big fan of AI for the mere fact that the way it's being wielded right now, the algorithm is being wielded to take money directly out of the hands of artists and use their work for the benefit of these longer companies. It's not a good look because it's bad.
Yeah.
But the concept of AI of something like, when you have something like Minecraft getting $1 billion, and we're talking about how the structure of it and the scene work of it are such that it's almost like nothing. It was created like AI.
Yeah.
Let's say Minecraft wasn't written by AI. And that's kind of true.
Yeah.
I think Jared has wrote a lot of it, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that AI tools weren't used. I don't know.
Sorry, that blows my mind that the Napoleon Dynamite guy did Minecraft. I still haven't recovered from wait, the Napoleon Dynamite guy did Minecraft?
I mean, if you watch Minecraft, the first 30 minutes of it are Napoleon Dynamite 2. It's incredible.
It's just kind of, and I know his catalog after Napoleon Dynamite. I don't even know if Napoleon Dynamite holds up. I haven't watched that movie in ages.
And stuff.
I know it hasn't, but it's still
he's like a Wes Anderson kind of type, where he's like, the style is the thing.
Yeah.
But the point is,
sorry.
When you think of these scenes as one thing leads to another, and you're like, what's the arc? And what's Jack Black's character? And you think of someone like, you think of a great character like Ripley or something like that from Alien, and you see how she is resourceful and changes over the thing, and she becomes headstrong in these ways, and she's determined in these other ways that she wasn't before, and she's stretched, and you see the manipulation of herself by herself over the span of the movie. That's a great film. That's a great character.
Yeah.
Jack Black's character basically does the same thing forever, and then at the end of the film goes, you know what, I am going to change.
Yeah.
Well, that feels like AI, right? Because it feels like, well, you got like there's a plot, there's a graph here.
Yeah.
It's like a sine wave or a cosine wave where things go up and go down. They basically plotted 3 points, down, up, down. It looks like a less resolved version of that curve. And because we're not paying attention to those kinds of story suggestions, AI is going to do this thing where it will exist and they're going to be shitty, but if it's wielded by the right hand, it can be excellent, just like anything else.
Well, just like we were talking about with filming, you say filmed with iPhone, like the new 28 Years Later movies filmed with iPhones. It's a tool that's
not true.
But you know what I mean?
I mean, it is, but it's like, look at the fucking rig.
Yeah, the rig and everything, 100%.
It's filmmaking in terms. It's not a guy running around with an iPhone.
But the idea of the tool, the tool, and we can argue the merit of like, why do you want it to look bad? But the idea of the person who wields the tool. But I agree with you in that we'll probably get an AI movie that'll be good because you at that point, it's just evolution. You throw enough things together. Eventually, one of it's going to, result into something. But I also think that that it's not like you said. Using the Ripley example, movies being art is an inherently human endeavor. You're connecting two people on a human level, and even I like I like my indie films. I like my blockbusters. I like all of them. You can replicate Die Hard as much as you want, and you'll get some good ones. Speed's a good Die Hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Speed's a good Die Hard, but that doesn't even though Die Hard's like an action blockbuster, like it's not deep. Jurassic Park's not deep, but it's still Spielberg making it. That boy knows how to make a movie, and so you connect with it in a way that I don't know anybody is capable of connecting with. Whatever
AI
Jurassic
is
World
not going to have an emotional intelligence for a very long time.
Yeah. It can't. It's
because
not. It's literally
not
not
what
built
we're
that way.
calling AI right now.
Yeah, because it's LLMs.
Frankly,
and
it's it's just an algorithm. It's
Yeah.
just a slightly more advanced model. It's not AI, but
Yeah.
that's just what we're calling it because that's the buzzword, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, they don't have emotional intelligence because they don't have to live emotionally until we teach that to them, which is going to be.
Yeah. Why would you do that?
That's a great question.
Emotions are tough. Why would you put that
You're
on
asking
somebody?
great questions, DJ.
Yeah.
But like until that happens, they're not going to be able to write. They might be able to write and mimic a great scene that, like, oh shit, that's amazing. It's like, yep, he just skinned Amadeus. It's just that. And you go, oh. And then you realize, wait a second, but isn't that what we say about our greatest artists? That they steal?
Are stealing. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but you steal it with class.
Yeah, and you
do
steal it
it
because
well.
it makes you feel a certain way. You steal that scene from Amadeus because you're like, oh, that created the feeling in me.
It created
that I
that
want to
feeling.
create the feeling in the audience.
AI will be able to replicate the idea of and then insert that feeling there.
Yeah.
The question whether or not the threshold that we're going to have to cross is can it do it?
Yeah.
And I just don't see it happening until we teach emotional intelligence to these machines.
Yeah.
Where they think about like, is that a more like is Mel Gibson's speech in Braveheart where he says freedom? Is it like is it that or is it this? Is it Ripley screaming "you bitch" at the like?
Yeah.
What emotional resonance are we really talking about? It's not going to be able to discern between any of them, other than humans like that.
And it's the same thing we're talking about.
It's good.
This is the good one, right? But it's the same thing we're talking about with like Minecraft and Mario Brothers movie and Deadpool and stuff like that. There were starts I laughed. Again, I think the Channing is deep cut as that Channing Tatum joke is. It's not like it made me laugh. It made me laugh when he
funny.
came up on the screen. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Because it's a joke is a joke. A joke can be anything.
Yeah, but like will people go back and like I think about again. I'm not some hoity-toity on my throne. Like I'm thinking of like Men in Black. Like I'll rewatch Men in Black, and all those feelings I had when I watched Men in Black for the first time flood back in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they're not capable of that, but I do wonder projects like that, are they capable of in generating those feelings in people, or is it completely held up by the feelings, other things? Is Minecraft held up by the feelings Minecraft gave you when you played Minecraft? You know what I mean? Is Deadpool and Wolverine built up on the feelings you had when you watched the Fox X-Men movies?
They seem to be completely nihilistic in that regard. Like it's like, especially with like Minecraft, it's like it has nothing to do with the intellectual property other than the font and the name and the look and like the backgrounds. Because it was like shot basically all on green screen anyway. But like there's references of there's a sword. And you're like, okay. But they get stuff wrong so often. Like, if you actually play Minecraft, a lot of stuff is like, we're going to go get the orb. It's like, what the fuck is that? You know, like, I put in 100 hours. I have no clue what you're talking about, dude. And it's because they make shit up because they're like, I don't know. Who gives a shit? And it comes from this attitude, I think, that it's like, games are still bullshit. It's the same mentality that made Super Mario Brothers movie that fucking atrocity. Is that it was like, we don't need to follow like this plumber who's jumping around and getting mushrooms. We don't need to do any fan service to that. It's bullshit. Let's get that hot piece Bob Hoskins in. Gonna make $1 million, baby.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's just the mentality behind it, right? That's all it really comes down to. If someone's really good at changing these scenes and making emotional resonance and having that moment that makes you feel all the things you watch when you're watching Men in Black, they're going to be able to accomplish it. The problem is that we're not creating those creators. We are facilitating a world that does not kind of embiggen the thought of that.
You're not hiring somebody that comes in because they have a vision. You're hiring somebody that will say yes. They're like, this is what we want this movie to do, and they'll be like, yes. Yeah, we'll do that.
We really need to be showing, and I think that's naturally going to happen. Why did you get into movies? Why did I get into movies? Why did anyone? You watched that one movie that just took your breath away, and you said, I want to do this for others. I want to be a part of that conversation because it's brilliant and beautiful and everything that humanity wants to be. And that kind of moment is not going to be crafted by Minecraft. but another moment will happen with Minecraft where they're like, this is just a nice, easy little thing that I can watch and forget about, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It is what it is, and it will have its benefit. It'll have its day in the sun. Will AI take over? I don't think so. They're going to try because it's a very efficient way for the studios to get rid of artisans and have to pay them.
Yeah.
But I think there's going to be a pushback on that because I think people are going to see that the quality of movies haven't improved. They've just gotten cheaper.
Yeah, and it's also a similar thing. I would imagine it feels to me as if they were coming out and being like, "Hey, we got this robot that can play basketball. Are you excited to see basketball played by robots?" Not really. I mean, like I'd watch it once and be like, "That's interesting." But like
at the same time,
Yeah.
I also think that we should just give all athletes steroids all the time.
well,
if they want to do it, because guess what?
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. No one should do steroids.
Yeah.
But you cannot tell me that if you grew up in the 90s and watched baseball, it wasn't awesome.
Well, it's the same thing. I saw some people complaining about like, Tom Cruise could be doing so much more interesting things than putting his life on the line for Mission Impossible. It's like, yeah, maybe, but also it rips, man. So shut up, maybe let him do, maybe
let him
his
do
life
whatever
on.
he hell wants. I actually think that he's just trying. All these Mission Impossible movies are a cry for help because like Scientology has gotten him so deep in.
Well,
He's like, just let me die, just let me die.
That's the thing, man. That's the other thing. It's like if he's not doing this, he's out doing Scientology stuff. Let him go to a fight on a biplane. I don't care.
Let him eat popcorn weird and talk to movie theater patrons like he's their best friend.
Have him make
Let
a
him
movie.
do that weird stuff.
That's safe.
I miss that Tom Cruise, man.
All right. I think we touched on most of the stuff I wanted to touch on just through the general course of the conversation, but I did want to touch on this final question from Jake Hefner from the Discord. What's something you think movies are doing better today and something you think movies did better in the past?
That's a great question. I think that the easy one, just to get us through, what they do better in the past, try to think of it's the emotional intelligence of it all, right? Like I think in the past, I don't know, I just watched Sinners, man, which rules.
It's so good, dude. I was just at the dentist before this. I was at the dentist and I was getting my next appointment, and there was this guy sitting next to me, and they're like, I thought it was so lame, and I was like, what movies are you talking about? And he's like, the vampires, and I realized they were talking about Sinners, and this guy went on a whole thing about how he didn't like Sinners, and I'm like, well, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. You're
It's
just
so much
incorrect.
fun.
Yeah.
Every scene was like, this is fun,
Yeah.
and it felt like on rails in a way that like Die Hard feels like it's on rails,
Yeah.
right? It's just like every scene is like, what's going to happen?
Yep.
And so it's not that we don't do it good anymore. We don't facilitate and we don't try to birth that type of artistry.
Yeah.
That kind of comes from, once again, that emotional intelligence. We're keeping away from that because we want things to be repeatable. So what we do worse at is fostering artists to kind of create stuff that look more like it used to.
Yeah.
To try to create stories that are fresh and new and relevant to the space that we're in. Now they're just repeatable, kind of like, let me guess, Disney film. My guess is that at the end of this, everyone's going to realize that the central position is the right one. So we're doing a lot of we're taking the easy road in terms of like what our stories are about is what I would say is what we're doing wrong.
No.
Now, technically, we're the best we've ever been.
Yeah.
Movie making has never been more efficient. All the tools at our disposal and the craftspeople, unless you're like, Jim Henson, are all the best that they've ever been.
Yeah.
And they're standing on the shoulders of geniuses. So the democratization and the ability for anyone to make a film, that is so like that wasn't even close in any time in history. Like that only got like 100 years of cinema. And only in the last like 15 have we really gotten to that place. And so that's like a whole new phase of filmmaking. Yeah. And I think that that's why we see it on things like YouTube and we see it on things like TikTok. Yeah. We don't see it on the silver screen. And so that's something we do better, I guess. Yeah. Just that the transformative aspect of media is now more present and conceptually there's a zeitgeist, there's a communication between everybody about what that is.
Yeah.
that didn't used to exist. Back in the days of the Hays Code, or like people would go watch a movie, maybe talk about it, move on.
Yeah.
Now we have like pop cultural ecosystems, and
Yeah.
that's amazing.
I'm going to co-sign a lot of that. I'll also say, basically saying what you were before, something we did better in the past, I think, is innovate. Especially if you're thinking, I feel like this is probably true throughout, but like 80s, 90s, I feel like there was a lot more narrative innovation than we have now. But something we do better now, I think, and this is a catch-22, but I do think I'm not against fan service entirely. I'm not against blockbuster stuff like that. So it's like the comic book nerd in me. It's like, man, we're doing better with source material, I think, than we ever have. The video game player in me, it's like, by and large, I didn't really care for the Mario Brothers movie, but like by and large, video game adaptations are the best they've ever been.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, Fallout was great. The Fallout show I really liked. But
And like, look at I mentioned the Dungeons and Dragons movie, the Honor Among Thieves.
Yeah,
that ripped, right?
Yeah, that was great.
And that movie was like, let's take an IP, but let's do something completely new with it and give it to people who love the IP and know and want to show and share, their love of Dungeons and Dragons with you. That's why that movie felt like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
Is that they chose the right creators who had its best interest in heart.
Yep.
It wasn't like, what's the number one thing we need to do in this movie, and number one reference that Minecraft allows, lava chicken, it's like that doesn't
yeah
the thing that Jack Black did, has nothing to do with Minecraft, but it's fine.
Yeah, so I think there's good and bad. I think what Abe's saying, I really appreciate your perspective on this and how things evolve and how part of it, and there's things that definitely could be improved, but there's also part of it, let the kids have their fun. There's balance. There's a balance on all of it.
There's a balance. We liked dumb shit too. Like it's the same thing when we look back and we go like, oh, these skibbity toilet.
Yeah.
Shut up, man. If we were badger, it's a snake. It's all the same stuff. Everyone's just trying to react to each other, and they just don't want to be old. And we're like, no, it's fine. Become old. That's all life is, man. And that's all the transitions and the larger trends of movie making and stuff. It's all governed by the same shit that it always has. Just because there's a new AI in town doesn't change much.
Yeah, totally. Abe, before we go, any final thoughts? And where can the kids find what you're working on?
So you can find me at Small Beans, wherever you search for podcasts. It's more of a podcast network. We have many podcasts, and it's a bunch of friends from the crack diaspora, and it's just like me, Adam Ganzer, Michael Swaim, Bridget Greenberg. We have all these people who just talk about movies, talk about video games, talk about wellness and mental health. And we have a bunch of different podcasts. Check out, there's probably a podcast that is perfect for you because we do so many. And patreon.com/smallbeans is our main deal. If you throw us a few bucks there, if you like what I'm spitting. But yeah, that's basically it. That's the main thing.
Check out Small Beans. I listen to their stuff. It's some great stuff. You guys are doing great work.
Thanks,
I really like your
YouTube.
The way you guys talk about movies and everything, all the stuff you dive into. So please check out Small Beans. There'll be a link in the description. You can find me at DJ Talks Trash everywhere that matters. Over on Blue Sky now. I'm not on X anymore, so you can find me on Blue Sky. If you're watching this, you're on my personal channel. You should check out the show I do with Sal from Comic Pop, where we've been going through the Superman movies. We just did Batman v Superman, so now we're at Justice League. We're going through all of them in the lead up to the new Superman movie. Yeah,
Dark Days.
Dark Days, but also some of the best hitting videos we've done on that series. So
there's a reason they're talked about.
Hey,
Superman's coming out, so
I'm hopeful.
Perfect series.
I'm a big Superman fan, so I'm hopeful that I'm not let down again.
Do you think there's going to be a Red Dawn, Red Sun, or whatever it is movie?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. Who knows at this point? Maybe. But I doubt it. I would doubt. I would be surprised.
How funny would that be?
That would be crazy.
Just in the middle of all of this, someone's like, "I'm going to make a movie. What if Superman was Russian?"
It actually is pretty relevant. It is pretty relevant now. But yeah, you can also check out the podcast I do, Only Stupid Answers. We drop new episodes every Monday. I want to thank everybody that joined us. Abe, thank you for being on
Thanks
the show
for
today.
having me, man. This is a blast.
And we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.